we run Starlink on our shop, we run it on our house, we run it on a remote cabin up in the mountains, and we also run it on several vehicles. Just this summer alone, we did 8,000 miles driving across the US and Mexico, and we learned a lot on those trips. It didn't all go well. I think I'm gonna add wheel studs to my spare parts bin, making us a cable for our Starlink. This is not the stuff that you can just learn doing speed tests on your front lawn in the middle of town. This is the stuff that you learn when you get out there in the wild and you find out that spec sheets are for starting campfires and that every piece of equipment has its breaking point and there's certain things you really need to know. Watch this video to learn the weaknesses of each type of Starlink antenna. Okay, we're gonna start with the standard kit that I have on the roof of the shop. Then we're gonna move over to the mini that I have right here, and then we will also cover the brand new Gen 3 Performance Kit that costs an astounding $2,000. But before we do that, I'm going to tell you why speed tests on these antennas, comparing them, is completely bogus, why we are not going to do that, and what you actually need to know about internet speeds on Starlink antennas. If you look up at the sky at night, there will be anywhere from 10 to less than 100 Starlink satellites covering your area at any given time. Your antenna is using one of those satellites as long as it can, and when the signal starts to degrade, it is jumping to another satellite, and that is called beam switching. Beam switching can take as fast as like 1/10 of a second, depending on lots of variables, and that affects your speed. That's why you can test a mini in a field without moving it 1 second, and it will tell you you have 260 something megabits per second, and you can hit the button again, and then it will tell you you have 70. The main thing you need to know is across all antennas, the median speed in the entire United States customer base is just almost 200 megabits per second. If you're taking the time to aim your antenna perfectly and make sure that you have no obstructions, you could be on the higher side of that. The other variable could be how many people in your local area are using it and what plan do you have. If you have too much people in your area and you don't have priority service, you're gonna get booted behind them, and that can slow you down, and that won't have anything to do with your antenna. Now, if you're a mobile user that's driving around at 60 miles an hour, you're gonna be on the lower side of this because your antenna isn't being perfectly aimed. The other thing is a lot of people that use the mini, they don't aim it at all. They just toss it out on the grass when they park somewhere and they use it. You shouldn't be expecting to have top of the line speeds when the antenna aiming isn't optimized in any way. Oh, and you might have seen an announcement recently where Starlink claimed that it doesn't matter whether you have trees on your property anymore. That's not entirely true. I'll explain what they're talking about as we dive into the standard kit and its strengths and weaknesses. So the standard kit is absolutely the best value for stationary use cases. It's a lot cheaper antenna than say like the performance one that's $2,000. You can use the pivot mount. The pivot mount is really critical. If you're going to use Starlink in one place and just park it, get the pivot mount. It will use that to map out the sky around it and figure out where all the obstructions are. And then it will figure out how to proactively dodge those when it's doing that beam changing from satellite to satellite. That's what Starlink was talking about when they said it doesn't matter if you have trees anymore. What they should have said is it doesn't matter if you have a couple trees or a couple obstructions. Their new algorithm is able to map around those and improve your speed greatly. Oh, I just noticed our background changed. That probably looked weird on camera. My name's Nathan Mueller, by the way, and this is Outdoor Auto. The reason that we test so much Starlink stuff is we build off-road vehicles that then go out to the middle of nowhere, so we get a lot of opportunity to test these things and mount them on vehicles. So if you are at all interested in off-road vehicles and off-road builds, and you're just found our channel for the first time because of the Starlink video, feel free to check out those videos. Okay, so now let's talk about the weaknesses of the standard kit. The biggest weakness on it is portability. It's about this big of an antenna, so it's much bigger than the mini. Now, the other problem is its ratings. So its waterproof rating is sure, it can handle water splashing down and rain going on it, but it's not necessarily suitable for like high speed blasts of water, which if you're going to be driving on a road at 85 miles per hour and it's pouring rain, that's somewhat like a high-speed jet of water. So it's not going to be the best for that. You could run into some water issues. The other thing is it can only handle 60-mile-per-hour winds. That's all it's rated to function in, okay? When you're driving on a freeway at 60 miles per hour, you're doing at least 60 miles per hour of wind, maybe more if you have a headwind, right? So there's a lot of problems there for its overall durability if you're gonna strap it on top of a car or an RV and just go for it. That's why a lot of times you'll find people doing external cases and stuff. But there's a lot more aftermarket support for external cases with the Mini than there is with the standard kit out there. It uses a lot more power. So again, that makes it not quite as good for portability. You know, it's gonna be averaging more in that 75 to 100 watts when it's operating versus the Mini that usually floats more in like the 20 to 40 range. So you're gonna have to have a lot more power to run it during the day when you're out camping or on the road. So you're gonna end up having to use bigger and bigger power packs. And have ways to generate your own power to recharge those. Temperature rating is 122 degrees, which sounds really, really high. So you'd think like maybe only Palm Springs and Phoenix or Death Valley, it's gonna be a problem, but that's not true. When you mount an antenna really close to the top of a vehicle, the heat will be it'll be a lot warmer between this thing and the vehicle than the air temperature. So we were regularly overheating these types of antennas, a standard kit antenna in Baja, when it's only like 102 degrees or 98 degrees. It does have that external router, which for setting up in a car is actually somewhat annoying, but for setting up at your home is awesome because it actually has better Wi-Fi than what the Mini has built into it. So you're gonna be able to have a little bit better speeds and a little bit farther range. Okay, so the Mini is my favorite Starlink antenna, but that comes with a lot of caveats, and there's a lot of issues that you need to be prepared for if you're gonna use this as your primary internet. I've got enough of them actually that I've got my notes to keep me on track so we can keep this moving fast. So we're gonna talk strength first. So some of the strengths on it, it uses way less power than the standard kit does. It's usually floating in that 20 to 40 range, but put a little asterisk next to that that we'll cover when we start talking about weaknesses. Also, it has a built-in router, which is pretty awesome because then you have less things to figure out and less wires to deal with and less things to mount in a vehicle. But also, again, put a little asterisk to that because there is a weakness on the flip side of that as well. The other thing is this thing is really lightweight and portable. It only weighs 2.5 pounds, which is amazing. It's really easy to move from vehicle to vehicle if you're trying to use it in more than one vehicle. But again, let's put a caveat, little asterisk next to that because I'm going to cover something in the weaknesses as well. Its rep sheet kind of starts to sound like 1990s Major League Baseball records, basically. It has a big aftermarket support, which is really cool. There are tons of companies that are making, cases for these things and cables and every accessory you can imagine exists for the Mini. Much better aftermarket support for this. I think Starlink is listening to us. Literally while making this video, I just got this text message. I can put it up on the screen. It says, refer Starlink for 1 month free. Share referral links with friends and family and anyone else. When they activate their Starlink, you both get a month free. I'll put the link for my referral link down below in the description. If you guys click on it, just like it says, you'll get a free month of internet after you've signed up and had it for a month. I'll get a free month as well. That would be great because that might be able to help me pay for this, which was $2,000, and we literally only bought this to test this to be able to make this video. This thing is actually faster than people think. A lot of people think because it's so small, it's just gonna be a huge downgrade in speed compared to like the standard kit or the performance kit. The reality is if you take the time to aim this, which it won't do automatically, you can use your phone and it will tell you which way to twist it and where to put it. If you do that and you stick it next to one of the standard kit antennas or even next to this performance antenna, you usually are getting very close to the same speeds right now. It's pretty much fast enough to handle the top end of speeds speeds that you will realistically be getting from Starlink at this point in time. We have traveled with this, by the way, through multiple countries and across borders, and when you're using the proper Roam subscription, it works fantastic. There's no issues. You drive straight through the border. It doesn't drop or anything like that. The truth is, this antenna is a very valuable resource for us. When you're going out into critical places where you're going to be on your own, or if there isn't a lot of help, this is one of the best case scenarios. Being able to have actual phone calls with people, talk to people, tell them all the important details, be able to look things up on the internet is pretty incredible for emergency situations. But we need to talk about the weaknesses. Where we said it's more portable, the problem is it still has the same ratings as the other standard kit antenna. So it's only rated for 60-mile-per-hour winds. It only has the same waterproof rating as the other antenna. So one thing you're going to realize is the Mini is essentially not created to handle what it was created to do. So in order to get it to do it right, you actually need a really, really good mount for it in case. And there's a bunch of factors that you should take into consideration when getting a case. We work with a company called Veritas Vans for all of our mounts. I'll put a link in the description. There's a couple reasons that we do that. And it's because, first of all, there's an outer mount, this outer piece of plastic that goes around and strengthens the actual antenna that makes it to where it can handle better than 60-mile-per-hour winds. This piece is made out of plastic that's used in like ballistic armor, basically. So it's very strong. It's not like a 3D printed like brittle thing or anything like that. The other thing is embedded in the ring that goes around and strengthens your antenna. It has screw holes on the bottom as well as on the top. So you can see on the top, we actually have suction cups attached to ours for mounting in the inside of the car. So you can like attach it to like a moonroof or like a front window. The alternative to that is you can screw in magnets on the bottom that look like this. These little magnets have 150 pounds of holding power that you can attach to the bottom. But when you're working with mounts, it is critical to think about where you're placing it in your vehicle. Because if you remember, this thing still has the problem with overheating. So if I put the magnets on it and I attach it directly to the top of my roof with no air gap, if I'm in a very, very hot area, I'm still going to have issues with overheating. If heat isn't an issue, that's a fantastic way to mount the antenna. In fact, early on in this video, there's a clip of my orange Land Cruiser and we're going snow wheeling, and that's exactly how I have it mounted to the roof of the vehicle. The other option is you can use screws through those same holes that you would attach the magnet mount, and you could mount it to a rack. And then it's easier to have like an air gap down there to get some wind going through there and keeping it cool. All right, so one other thing to point out about this mount is you see this white piece that's on top. Well, this is the front of the antenna that faces up to the satellites, and it has a whole plastic layer over top of the antenna. So if rocks or hail or even water and all that kind of stuff, it just hits this and bounces off. This is, again, that ballistic plastic. The cool thing about this is the Starlink antenna doesn't even know it's there. It doesn't interfere with the type of signal that Starlink uses in any way, shape, or form. So you're not going to have to deal with obstructions, yet you have protection on the front of it. This is a critical piece. If I take this off and show you the face of my antenna right now, it has a bunch of nicks that are out of it that was before I put this piece on. Just random rocks and stuff on the highway were actually starting to damage the face of my antenna. We like these antennas enough that Veritas Vans decided to come on board as a sponsor for today's video, by the way. And all they're doing is just helping us pay for this antenna so we could actually test this antenna. So nobody's getting rich here. They just help us not go broke and be able to like buy equipment. On top of that, the one thing I will tell you guys, if you think I'm just saying this because we have a sponsor that makes these, I've seen 3 different mini antennas on the side of highways in the last 2 months that were smashed. My friend down in Baja, he's lost 1. It was because he was using cheap magnets that didn't have, good enough holding power to the top of the roof. And his blew off when he hit a pothole. So make sure to get a good case for your Mini. It's not really a good mobile solution or motion solution without one. We actually ran this in the front window in the middle of the vehicle, and you'd probably think like, doesn't that block your vision so you can't see out your window? You'd be amazed how long windshields are. When I put this all the way at the bottom and suction cup it to the front of the window, it works great. You have the vent blowing up there, so it never overheats. In some states, that's gonna be illegal. So you might have to use a sunroof or a side window. The downside of that, since we're talking weaknesses, is when you mount it to the front of your vehicle, the thing you need to understand is you're going to get slower speeds because your beam switching is not working nearly as well. It's not predictive in any way. It's just having to guess, and then when you turn, it wipes it out and has to start over, okay? When you're driving, this thing uses way more power than it does when it's sitting stationary. So when people are like, oh, it only uses 20 to 40 watts. Sure, when it's sitting still. If you mounted it on the very top of your roof, even when you're changing direction, then it still has the same view of the sky. So for the most part, it'll do a little bit better if you mount it pointed straight up than if you have it mounted pointed out when you're driving, okay? But either way, you're gonna notice that the power consumption is higher, and this is where a bunch of cable problems happen, okay? There's cables that they plug into like your little cigarette lighter. You test it before you go on your trip and it works great. Then you get in your car and you start driving and your person in the passenger seat wants to use the internet and it keeps turning on and dying and turning on and then dying and turning on and dying. And the reason is when you're driving and turning and it keeps having to boost the signal to find however it does it, when it loses satellite connections and has to reestablish connections, you'll see the power, if you have like a meter where you can read the power, you'll see it keep going up, and then when it gets connected steady, you'll see it drop down, and then it will go up and it'll go down. When it goes up, those little 12-volt ports, those little cigarette lighter ports in your car, generally do not provide enough power to keep this thing going. The whole it uses less power, yeah, it doesn't use over 100 watts regularly, but if you read the details in the manual, it actually says to make sure and use a PD port that can provide up to 100 watts. So I think it definitely has spikes that you don't see very often that do go up there. And if you don't have enough power for it, it gives up. The other thing that we ran into in Baja is if you're gonna go on a long trip, bring extra cables. Because if you can't use this type of cable, which is the cigarette port one, when you're driving, by the way, it'll work fine when you're in camp. So if you can't count on this one when you're driving most of the time, well, then you kind of end up resorting usually to like one of the USB-C ports, okay? Now a USB-C port that can power this is that they're a thicker cable one, and it's gonna look like this. So it's gonna stick about 1.5 inches out of the side of whatever you have it plugged into. If you're on a big week to 10-day long trip with camping gear and stuff, it is very easy for something to end up on top of this and push it. So ours ended up getting bent right here, and then it died, and it wouldn't power our antenna anymore. Our backup cable that we had was one of these, which doesn't work when we're driving. And the main thing that we were using the internet for was for mapping. We were on a trip where we got hired to do a bunch of mapping of Baja out in the middle of nowhere in the mountains. So in order to do mapping, we needed the internet. So I like this cable. Again, this is a cable from that company, Veritas Vans. They have a cable that has 3 ends on it. It has one of the cigarette lighter ports that'll work when you're not moving. It has a barrel jack port, and then it has a USB-C. And then on the other end, it has the barrel jack that plugs into your antenna. I like this one because you're probably gonna be using the USB-C, especially if you use motion data. But for some reason you break this, at least you have backups of something else that can power it in an emergency situation. So I'm kind of a big fan of this one. Or let's say you forget whatever thing you were supposed to bring that will power it with USB-C, and all of a sudden you're already way out in the middle of nowhere. Well, you'll have these 2 other options to find power a different way. Cigarette lighter one is very reliable as long as you're not moving, right? So this is my favorite cable to bring for emergency situations. But even if you bring this one, I would still recommend getting a USB-C one, bundling it up, sticking it in your glove box, and just having it there as a backup if you break your cable. The barrel plugs, most of the types of devices that you plug a barrel plug, if you try to go from a barrel plug to a barrel plug on this, a lot of them don't provide enough power for it either when you're traveling in motion. So cables is a really big thing to plan in advance for and bring a backup. That almost got us stranded with no internet in the middle of a work project. When you go under like an overpass, like with a bridge, you'd think it's kind of be like that beam switching where it loses signal for a second, and then the second you pop out on the other side, it'll grab a thing and you're back, ready to go. It doesn't tend to work that way. If you go through really thick trees or a canyon that particularly blocks out the satellites, or like an overpass, I noticed that a lot of times your internet will cut off, for the split second when you're under there. But when you come out the other side, it's almost like it reinitiates, like figuring out where everything is. So it usually takes like a good, 60 to 90 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, for it to it doesn't like reboot, but it has to like reestablish everything, and then your internet comes back on. So just something to know. Let's also talk about the Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi, and this is an older antenna, I believe it's a Wi-Fi 5 antenna. It doesn't go very far. At about 50 feet, you're good. When you start moving between 50 feet and 100 feet from your vehicle, you're gonna start to see that speed tank off really, really fast. It's not the best Wi-Fi signal compared to some of these other guys that are on newer versions of Wi-Fi. Okay, so to close it out and just re-emphasize it, placement. Where you place this on a moving vehicle, if you're trying to have motion data, is absolutely critical. Anywhere you place it outside, you can run the risk of overheating. Anywhere you place it inside, you have the problem of where it can be searching for satellites a lot more and it can impact your speeds. Best case scenario would be like suction cupping it to the top of a skylight. If you do that, these guys do have these little holes in the sides here. I would recommend, I know this sounds insane, but if you suction cup this to the glass right behind your head in a car and you get in a crash on a freeway, if for some reason this did break loose, it's coming at you and it's a weapon. So you can get a little tiny cable, like the cables they use for attaching like laptops to a desk. You can put it in here with a bolt, and then you can attach it to one of the seats in the back, like the headrest or something, and make sure it doesn't have enough length on it to come after you. Word of, always tie down heavy items. If you get in a wreck, they can come at you real quick. Okay, so let's talk about the performance antenna. This thing is actually incredible. It kind of sounds like I've been bashing it on a lot, because $2,000 for an antenna is kind of insane. But let me at least explain some of the reasons it's so expensive. It is directly mountable. It's gonna come looking like this. The whole back of this is a piece of aluminum. It has these nice bolt holes on it that are very, very secure. So this thing can be bolted directly on to a roof rack and it is ready to go. As far as the waterproofing on this, it has the next 2 levels up above this. So this thing can handle high pressure water jets spraying directly on it, like getting pressure washed, and it's totally fine. It can be submerged underwater for up to 30 minutes, and it's totally fine. It can handle hotter temperatures. This thing is rated for 140 degree heat. So if you mount this, also remember this is aluminum. Aluminum's really good at dispersing heat. So if you mount this properly on the top of a vehicle with a little bit of an air gap, like I said, on a roof rack or something like that, I don't think you're gonna have problems with it overheating unless you're in the most extreme heat in Arizona. You remember the wind rating on the other one where it's only at 60 miles an hour? This thing can handle 174 miles per hour. So it's truly in its current state without doing anything to it is sturdy enough to actually mount on the outside of a vehicle, drive fast, and do all your adventures. So that's pretty cool. $2,000 to go from one that needs some assistance with a case. By the way, I think this case is $70, and it makes it to where it can do almost all this, except for the heat rating. But, you know, $2,000 is a lot of money to pay for that. The other thing that you're getting, of course, if we're talking about pros, is this thing can handle up to 1 gigabit speeds. Now, 1 gigabit speeds don't exist right now. Starlink is telling us that those are coming in 2026, and the way I feel about that is the same way I feel about, like, you know, when Elon Musk said that a Cybertruck was gonna cost $40,000. I wouldn't have bought one either way, but they ended up costing more than double that, and took a lot longer to come to market than they said. So Starlink and a lot of the other companies under that banner tend to overpromise and underdeliver, or at least deliver late. So if somebody's buying this, counting on the fact that they're gonna have 1 gigabit internet next year, I think that's probably a really bad idea. But if you're buying this because you want all the durability and everything that it has to offer, and faster internet speeds in the future is just in your mind like, Brad, that'll be a bonus when that happens, by all means, then this could make sense for you. Let's look at some of the other strengths. Oh, it does come with options for mounting it at an angle or a flat mount. You just pick what one you want when you're ordering it. It doesn't cost any more or less when you do that. I got the flat mount because I wanted it going straight up as possible if I was gonna mount it on the top of the vehicle. Then it's changing directions, full orientations less, and I'm hoping that that means it can stay locked onto the same satellites for longer. That was the other improvement. This has that 140-degree view of vision, or field of vision, instead of the 110 that these guys have. So the thing to think about there, it doesn't seem like that makes a huge difference. But 110 and 140, you have 30 degrees of extra view of the sky while you're trying to follow satellites as long as possible. And the longer you can stick with one before jumping to another, the better your connection is. So this thing does achieve some faster speeds, not because of the 1 gigabit thing, just simply because the field of vision is not switching as much. Okay, so one of the other cool things about this is it comes with an external power supply that can handle both AC and DC power. So it makes it a lot more easy to power it in a vehicle or in an RV. The other thing is you can plug in both AC and DC power to that power supply, and it will serve as redundancy. So if one goes down, it can automatically switch to the other one. So this thing is for those people that just have to have the absolute best, have to have the fastest internet that can possibly be had. They need that as close to 100% uptime as possible. You know, all those types of things. This is made for those people. This is also made for going on boats. That's why a lot of the waterproofing and all that stuff, you know, this is for boats and airplanes and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. Now we got to talk about negatives. So, because even some of the positives I listed become negatives. So this thing, portability, if we were talking about how the standard kit isn't that portable, this one's even a little bit more annoying to set up in a portable manner. So first of all, this thing is huge, and it weighs 11.5 pounds. Because it has that full aluminum case on it. So with the full aluminum case, you're talking 11.5 pounds. I'm 6'4". This thing is big. It's not that much bigger than the standard kit, but it's way heavier. This is your power supply for this thing. Also huge and also really heavy. It's like it's made of lead or something. I don't know what it is, but this thing is super heavy. So by the time you're hooking all this up, plus this up, plus all the wires between all of them, this gets a little bit hard to just fit in the back of a pickup in an organized fashion. It takes up a lot of room. So depending on your rig, I would not call that a super portable setup. I don't really see this as something you can mount inside of your vehicle. It's just too big. Maybe you guys can figure out a way to do it, but I don't see it. So you're gonna have to mount it outside of a vehicle for portability. As far as the speed on it, speed is obviously the same as the standard antenna pretty much right now. You could get maybe a little bit of improvement because of the 140 degree, so it's not beam switching as much. Maybe you could notice a little bit there. But on side-by-side tests, until Starlink gets its other new satellites launched, that maybe is 2026, this really doesn't offer any advantages in speed over the other antenna. Price, $2,000 bucks. The biggest thing on this is this thing's clearly out ahead of its time because they don't have 1 gigabit speed yet and it's ready for them. So the question is, in a year or longer, when 1 gigabit speeds come out, sometime between now and then, do you think this is going to go on sale? All their other antennas have went on sale and been discounted, and a lot of them have been discounted deeply. So if you have a Mini and you're traveling with that, I would tell you, and you're happy with it, you could just wait out and watch for this to hopefully come down from $2,000 to a much more affordable price. The average power that this uses is between 75 and 100 watts. That's a lot of power to plan for. We already talked about that with the standard kit. If you're trying to do that in a portable manner, you're going to be bringing big power in a truck or something like that for camping. If you're in an RV and you already have a great power solution and you're powering all kinds of stuff, or you have a generator or something, it's not going to be a big deal. Obviously, you're not going to be powering it off of like a 12-volt like cigarette lighter. It's just not going to work. But one of the other things that surprised me is with how expensive this is, you're still getting the same Wi-Fi router that the standard kit has. So it's a little bit faster than the Mini, but there's much better routers out there nowadays. I'm excited for the future to see how fast the internet can be on it. But frankly, between you and me, the 200 gigabit or 200 megabits per second that I get on the Mini, I can do conference calls with that without ever having issues. I can browse everything that I want. And even when I'm making these videos for you guys and I'm out in a remote location and I have to upload my huge video, even though they have somewhat slow upload speeds and somewhat slow download speeds for video, if I start it before I go to bed, it's done in the morning, pretty much the same way I use my internet here at home. And it works for me. If you're curious how I power my antennas when I'm traveling and off-roading out in trucks, I covered that pretty in depth. I use these little solutions right here. It's an inverter. This goes to my battery and powers it, and this is the battery pack that I use. I covered that in a lot of detail in this video that covers a whole lot of Amazon gear that I actually use when we do go out on these trips. So if you want to know how all that was wired up, check that out.